It's your boy Breakdowns with Jay, and I'm gonna talk about the Cleveland Browns. Is it time we start talking about them as a real contender in the AFC? This is a team that has a quarterback, has a run game, has a receiving game, good O-line, pretty solid defense. And I think because of the stuff around that team, whether it's clownish behavior from players to coaching decisions to elusive contracts that are being paid out that are not necessary, for character issues and scandals and just everything on the team, we have not talked about them. And rightfully so. They haven't produced on the field since 2020 when they went 11-5 and won that alone playoff game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just one of those things that it's coming up to where we're going to have to talk about the Cleveland Browns again in a positive light. And I want to start that trend. It's already been started, but I want to really dive into it because I love this team. This team, like I was noticing, has a really good roster. This is a team that it's kind of like this team has to break out. And I'm going to get in on Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski has been there since 2020, and he has one good regular season and a playoff win, and that was in 2020, his first year, and nothing since. It is time before it starts getting a little bit hot, because it's on simmer right now for Kevin Stefanski, and a lot of people don't really like his play style at all anyway, that I've seen and kind of really read around, that people are not really fond of this guy as a head coach. And it's a prove it year. You gotta update the resume. You got to update the resume. See, a lot of the times, and this happens in the NBA, notably with Doc Rivers and every Boston Celtic, they lived on that 2008 championship for years. I am telling you, years. And it was to the point where it blinded so many individuals, but at the same time they noticed. It's like, come on, like, gotta update the resume. But in the NFL, it's a different breed. You got to do what you have to do, and you have to do it quick. The NFL, not for long, any of that. That stuff, short attention span is real. The Rams won the Super Bowl in 2021, and they had a terrible season. Nobody talks about them as a contender. That's how quick you can be forgotten. That is how quick you can be forgotten in the NFL. So that lone good season he had, and they played really well against the Kansas City Chiefs, if I remember. And it came down to where the backup quarterback won the game when Patrick Mahomes went down, and everybody's like, the Cleveland Browns are back. They're going to come and make wonders. And then that team never recovered, to where they had to make dramatic changes and get people with character issues, and things is starting to look bright now, but it wasn't for a couple of seasons. So it's just kind of one of those things that I feel Kevin Stefanski has to prove it. And I think Deshaun Watson, you got paid $230 million, fully guaranteed. You have to show something. And I know you came back in week 12, and it's one of those things that you didn't have much time to make an impact. But all I will say is that Brissett had the team in a pretty decent position. I think they were like 5-7 or something like that, where you could have went on a stretch of wins and you didn't. You actually did the opposite. So it's one of those things. I understand you haven't really played a full season of football really since 2020, because you sat out 2021. The scandals, everything started coming up during that anyway, but you didn't want to play. And then you got suspended in 22. You played the preseason games, and then I think it was a series of or something like that. And then you came back and played the last quarter of football in 2022. So you got a full OTAs, you got full mini camp, you got full training camp, you got full everything this season. And you don't have any excuses, no room for any of that, especially with this talent. Nick Chubb, David Njoku, traded for Elijah Moore from the Jets, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Amari Cooper, good O-line. Like, there is no running from, oh my, he didn't have this or he's still this. And then on top of it, it's the contract. It really is the contract. Because I think people would lay off a little bit and understand. But when you get paid that type of money, somebody in the Browns office building thought you were worth that. So you got to live up to the billing. That note has to be paid off in wins, playoff wins, deep playoff runs, maybe an MVP, for sure an MVP. I mean, what am I saying? Maybe a Super Bowl berth, probably, with getting paid that much money. And it's just one of those things that this roster just added this offseason, traded for Zadarius Smith to pair along with Myles Garrett because the Jadeveon Clowney experiment did not work. Jadeveon Clowney is a sad case. This is a guy that was going to be the next coming of Lawrence Taylor, and he literally became the complete opposite. This is a guy who had good little stretches for the Texans, then bounced to the Seahawks, then went to the Cleveland Browns, I think, after that. And he's just won it out, blew up on all the team coaches on how he was handled, and just was an ugly exit by a guy who has underperformed his whole career. There's a guy who hasn't broke double-digit sacks, I think, in his whole career. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he is not. But this is a guy who needs to have 20 and a half sacks. And it didn't work out. But Zadarius Smith is a productive defensive end / linebacker in my mind. This is a pass rusher that can get to the quarterback, and he has the hardware to prove it. This is a guy who's had double-digit sacks, who's been disruptive, who's made plays, and I think it'll work out for that. I like Dalvin Tomlinson. This is a guy that is a good run stuffer. He can get into the passing lanes. He can disrupt the quarterback to make them pivot out of the pocket to where they got to put themselves in a situation where they got to do things they're not comfortable doing. And he's a big body. And I think in that rotation that has Jordan Elliott, that has other noticeable pieces like Tristan Hill. And it's just one of those things I feel that the defensive side, if you could say there was a weakness that you really got to see, because the offensive side, we've seen Donovan Peoples-Jones produce. We've seen Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Nick Chubb. The offensive line has Pro Bowlers on it. So we've seen that. But the defensive side, outside of Denzel Ward and probably Anthony Walker Jr. coming into his own, maybe Grant Delpit, Greg Newsome, he's showing out to be some player as well on the other side of being a corner from Denzel Ward. But we really haven't seen that defense produce outside of Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. So other guys need to step up. So it's just kind of one of those things that I love the addition of Juan Thornhill from the Kansas City Chiefs. Is a guy that is replacing John Johnson III, and he left in free agency, but he's a guy that I feel can really spread the ball. He's one of those guys that his range on the ball and coverage and playmaking, it's really one of those remarkable things you see in a player. John Johnson, he's an older type of player, so his range, he wasn't really doing much on spreading and really making tight spaces. He was a solid piece for the Browns. He was good on the Rams. I think that's where he played a majority of his career. But it's just one of those things, a guy who's longer, who's a bit bigger, and Juan Thornhill is really going to help out, especially with Grant Delpit in the secondary with him as well. And then you got the two lockdown corners with Greg Newsome the second, and then you got Denzel Ward, who's a ball hawk in himself. But it's just one of those things. The defense is where I'm like putting my ears up. But other than that, I mean, they re-signed a lot of their key pieces. I like the safety addition of Rodney McLeod. He's one of those, he's been a journeyman. I think he played a majority years for the St. Louis Rams, because I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, so I kind of remember his name or whatever. And he played in multiple other stops as well. And it's just one of those things that he's a good veteran piece if anything goes wrong, or really a rotational guy as well, because you got to stick bodies in there, you know. And then you got re-sign Maurice Hurst. That's a guy that I think is one of those that can disrupt the run, and he can clog the lanes. So this is all set up, and this all comes down to, can the defense hold up their end of the bargain and create stops? There was some times last year where it felt like the offense did enough, but then the defense let the team down. If you remember noticeably the game against the Jets where Joe Flacco had the comeback, the Jets win the game in 1 minute and 10 seconds. How does that work? You're up by 2 possessions and they come back and win like that. That shows me that you have a defensive problem. And it's just one of those things that I feel with these additions, maybe really hammering the interior. And I'm not really worried about the interior as much, but really adding to that, to maybe you're banking on the pass rush. Because one side of the pass rush working doesn't really matter, because if the secondary and the linebackers can't hold up their end, then what's the point? So I think especially adding on the back end, it's really gonna make or break the Browns. And then if Deshaun Watson plays like he was playing this past season, like hot garbage, it's just gonna be one of those things that's like, okay, we're gonna have to shift everything, because his contract, what it's gonna do is increase every year on how much he gets paid. And you know what that means? You lose players, you lose things that are key valuable assets. You're gonna lose offensive linemen. You're gonna maybe lose an Njoku or a Chubb or a Amari Cooper to free agency, or you're gonna have to get rid because of cap casualties. So it's just one of those things. You got to get something out of this right now. So tell me what you guys think. Do you guys agree? Or tell me your guys' opinion on this, on what you guys feel they need to do or have done to make this season a success. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'm Breakdowns with Jay, and I'm